Hi, everyone. Hopefully this is showing well. I'm Dr. Karnick. I'm one of the pediatric neurologists that work with the headache program here at Phoenix Children's. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you guys about some common migraine triggers and ways that you can identify your own. So what is a migraine trigger? That's probably a very almost self-explanatory thing, but what we're specifically talking about is a stimulus that can provoke migraine. And those stimuli can either be external or internal to our bodies. And why triggers are important is because if you can remember from Dr. Little's talk in the beginning, these are things that can act at different sites within the central nervous system or the cerebral blood vessels to help promote the onset or development of a migraine. And so in that way, it's important to try to identify what our triggers might be. You would be able to recognize a pattern in your migraine symptoms. And in a situation like migraines where it's almost like you don't have any control or a sense of control over when your next migraine is going to come, when, or how or where you might be, learning your triggers helps give you a little bit of that control back in your hands. So a little bit of power back by learning how to manage your migraines and how to potentially avoid a future migraine attack. So everyone has different migraine triggers, but there are a few common ones that affect many people living with migraine. And this is meant to be a poll. So we'll see if it works. And Kelly, you might have to help. But so what do you think is the most common migraine trigger out of the choices listed below?
So everyone can go ahead and click on which one they think is the answer. And then I'll be sharing the results with everybody. All right, we got a big range here. 25% saying the weather, 67% saying emotional stress, 29% saying caffeine, 14% saying poor sleep.
Awesome. Well, so the majority of you guys actually hit it right on the head. It is emotional stress, but this was almost a little bit of a trick question because all of these listed are migraine triggers. But if we have to think about what is the most common among people that suffer from migraines, it is emotional stress. So Dr. Arnold did a wonderfully detailed job about discussing why we might have more migraines in the setting of stress or untreated anxiety and untreated mood. But this actually, unlike some of the other triggers I will talk about a little bit later in the presentation, this actually has scientific backings. And so for example, there was a large study of individuals, so 1,750 people with migraines, and about 3/4 of them, which would mean about 1,300 of those individuals, said that they did have a migraine trigger. And out of those 1,300 people, right, 80% of them reported that stress was their trigger. So that's a lot of people, and it's very real, and it's very there, and it's not just you, if that's ever the thought. So, and also, as Dr. Arnold talked about, you kind of get into this cycle where stress causes migraines, and then the feeling of if you are suffering from really frequent migraines and that chronic pain leads to more stress, and then some of that anticipatory fear reaction that she was talking about. So worrying about when your next migraine will occur or in what setting. Am I going to be at home? Am I going to be at a friend's house? Am I going to be at the movie theater? So it is really, really important to take into consideration some of the strategies she talked about, and also to just overall how to best manage your stress. So thinking about your sleep, thinking about prioritizing what you do in a day, time management skills, communicating what you need to others, and really finding that support network within family and friends. So I said earlier, sleep. Sleep is really, really important for so many functions of the human body, but especially with headaches. And again, this does have scientific backing. So they did research 200 individuals with migraines, and over 85% of them said that they had poor sleep quality, which for them associated with the number of migraines they were having, as well as some mood disorder, particularly anxiety or depression. And also from, thinking back to Dr. Little's talk and the pathophysiology, we know that there's great interplay in certain regions of the brain. And so the reason there's such a strong link is because, migraine physiology, sleep, and mood are all impacted within the same regions of the brain and involve some of the same neurochemicals or neurotransmitters. So another poll, so there's no right or wrong answer to this, but just, I think it might be helpful to see, on average, how much sleep do you guys out there get on, in a night?
All right, and your poll should be popping up on your screen. And I'll give you a few, maybe 30 seconds to answer. All right, I think the results are in. Oh, a few more people coming in here. All right, we have 13%, 10 hours or more. So great for you, whoever that is. 8 to 9 hours, 38%, 7 hours, 38%, and 6 hours or less, also 38%.
Wow, okay. So that really is all across the board then. So, and I'm not sure what the demographic, the average age demographic is out there, but if you're a typical adolescent, really the recommended number of hours of sleep is actually close to about 10, but anywhere from 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night is what's recommended. And so, a majority of you are getting less than that. So that's something important to think about and sort of, strategizing and managing time during the day, but also, implementing good sleep habits and things like that. Okay, and then another common trigger is caffeine. And so, what's interesting about caffeine use is that many of you have probably either been told or heard that if you drink a cup of coffee and take some Tylenol and maybe catch a nap, that's, what's going to be really helpful for a headache or migraine, or maybe that's what's really helpful for your migraines. So I think there's both some truth and some false aspects to that. So in truth, we know from the physiology lecture that there is some enlargement or vasodilation of the blood vessels, which can kind of lead to some of those headache symptoms and headache pain. And so caffeine, what it does is it actually narrows or constricts those vessels. So in the short term, yes, it can potentially help alleviate some of the pain. However, you have to be careful with it because consuming too much caffeine can lead you into this sort of caffeine rebound, which is another type of headache that's secondary to the withdrawals of caffeine. And so, caffeine use is just so common with everyone of all ages, really, on a day-to-day basis. And so individuals with headaches or migraines are especially prone to this. So it's another thing to really keep in mind. So this is our final poll for this lecture, but on average, out there, guys, how much caffeine do you drink in a day or a week?
All right, the results are coming in. The majority every day, 71%, and then 29% has none. So both ends of the spectrum.
Wow, okay, all right. So you're either here nor there. Well, yeah, so I know that there could be a lot of different reasons we are using caffeine. Some of it might be just for enjoyment, like I enjoy getting a Dutch Brothers or a Starbucks. I enjoy the taste of these beverages, but once again, it is a type of lifestyle modification that we can improve on, and it really could help reduce the frequency of headache attacks. So it's really something worth also considering. So some other common migraine triggers include things like dehydration, very important to stay well hydrated on a daily basis. skipping meals or not eating, what happens in those situations is, each time we eat, the food gets broken down into blood sugar. And so once that sugar level drops, especially if we're not eating or we kind of go into that fasting state a little bit, you're prone to developing a headache or migraine. Some individuals are really sensitive to weather changes, so changes in barometric pressure. Here in Arizona, we have that monsoon season, which is something that really gets some of our migraine patients, as well as the summer heat here, and also dehydration secondary to excessive heat or even excessive humidity. So, those things to keep in mind. Some individuals are really sensitive to light or odors, so they might have an element of photophobia as part of their migraine, but also as a trigger for their migraines, and certain odors like perfumes or cleaners and things like that. And then another important aspect is in females to think about hormonal changes and the menstrual cycle. So, during the cycle, there are various levels of estrogen and progesterone, and, certain changes along the cycle can definitely trigger someone's headaches or migraines. And those typically are referred to as menstrual migraines, but, so certainly something to think about. Now, there are other possible dietary migraine triggers, and these foods or dietary triggers don't necessarily have a lot of scientific evidence behind them. However, based on the fact that they're self-reported so frequently among migraineurs, we can consider that, some of these do have a higher incidence in triggering headaches and migraines. So aspartame is one. That's an artificial sweetener. Some people might know it by their trade name, Equal or NutraSweet. And it's interesting because a lot of these healthier or diet type of beverages, as you can see, Diet Coke, Sprite Zero, the way they sweeten their drinks is they don't use actual sugar, but they'll use aspartame. So something to recognize there. MSG is a flavor enhancer that's actually naturally found in different types of foods, including tomatoes and certain cheeses, but it's also an additive to other types of foods like canned vegetables, processed meats, Asian food, soy sauce. Food preservatives that contain nitrates and nitrites, chocolate, which contains caffeine, cheese, like I said, which just now contains MSG, cured meats, citrus fruits, those are all other potential or possible dietary migraine triggers. So when you suspect you might have any one of those dietary or food triggers I just mentioned, or other types of foods may have been triggering your headaches, it might be reasonable to maybe remove it from your diet or avoid eating it for a month and kind of see how your migraines respond. But I wouldn't necessarily take that list and run with it and just sort of put yourself on a super strict diet and avoid X, Y, and Z, because you could be missing out on a lot of nutrients that you could potentially get from some of those foods. And then also to keep in mind that when you eat or consume a food, some people may have an immediate migraine or reaction, so within the first hour or two, but that can actually be delayed up to 24 hours. So, when you have a migraine, you eat a food, just to kind of keep that in mind. So this brings me to, how do we best identify our migraine triggers? So there's no better way than to go ahead and just track them. And you can do it the old-fashioned way with just keeping a journal or a headache log. There's also headache diary apps. I've listed two here, the iHeadache app and then Migraine Buddy, which a lot of our families do use. And these are really helpful, once again, because as I said earlier, it kind of takes a situation that might seem like it's a little bit out of control and put it back into your control, where if you can avoid certain things, you might see that you can help to reduce the frequency of the migraines you're experiencing. And this is a copy of the headache log that we have as part of our group. But if you Google headache diary log. There's several that come up. There's one, I think, from the National Headache Foundation that you can get off the internet, and several more, I'm sure. But as you can see, they all, and including in the apps, they all kind of talk about the same things, when it occurred, how you were feeling, how long it lasted, what type of treatment did you take, and if there were any triggers. So, all right, and that is it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you for participating in the polls.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.